My Gavan and Melonin, and well met indeed. I'm Arachir Galadirthan, and welcome to another Divide and Conquer faction lore video, where we will deal with the lore of a faction as laid out by Tolkien, and then discuss what we in Divide and Conquer have changed. If you're just here for Tolkien's ramblings and writings, then the first part of the video and all of the links that we will use in the video, or rather the timestamps, are in the description below. But before I begin, please allow me to just first of all thank Ron Toto for ascending to the rank of Banner Marshal and supporting the channel to the maximum of its possibility. I am very grateful to you, and to all indeed, as the names will appear at the end of the video. Allow me also to caveat this, although you'll know already because YouTube tells you, this video is not going to be very long. As with all nations where Tolkien didn't write much about them, there's only so much that we can add in Divide and Conquer, as all we need them to be are total war-based factions. So I'm afraid this one will be on the shorter side. And with that done, let's dive into the first part with Tolkien's setting. In all of Tolkien's writings, there are 3 known mentions of Khand, and they are as follows. Many of the Wainriders now passed south of Mordor and made alliance with the men of Khand and of Near Harad, and in this great assault from north and south, Gondor came near to destruction. And then again later, at the time of the War of the Ring, new strength came now streaming to the field out of Osgiliath. There they had been mustered for the sack of the city and the rape of Gondor, waiting on the call of their captain. He now was destroyed, but Gothmog, the lieutenant of Morgul, had flung them into the fray, Easterlings with axes and Variags of Khand, Southrons in scarlet, and out of Far Harad, black men like half-trolls with white eyes and red tongues. East rode the knights of Dol Amroth, driving the enemy before them, trollmen and Variags and orcs that hated the sunlight. South strode Eomer, and men fled before his face, and they were caught between the hammer and the anvil. And lastly, we have one very small piece which Christopher Tolkien laid out in The Peoples of Middle-earth from the History of Middle-earth series as thus. Of the speech of men of the East and allies of Sauron, all that appears is Mumach, a name of the great elephant of the Harad. My father, in a similar edition, named beside Mumach also Variag and Khand. And that is all Tolkien ever writes, I'm afraid. But it is often speculated, and I use that word in the fullest of its sense, that Variag is born of Varangian. The Varangian or Varangian Guard were a notable unit of mercenaries from the Norse lands, but who fought for the Byzantine Empire, and more specifically, as I gather, for the Emperor himself as an elite guard at some point in their history. And from that minor resemblance, many people suggest that the Variags are more actually akin to desert Vikings, but we simply just do not know. Tolkien, either the older or the younger, never did elaborate on either Khand or the Variags, and all I have said before is all we actually know of them. Owing to the obscurity of Khand and its people, in creating a faction out of them, Divide and Conquer had to get creative. Long before any of the current team joined the mod, the decision was taken that Khand would act like a Mongol-inspired nation. Out on the steppes of Khand, the various tribes of that place then eke out a meagre existence, living as nomads and wandering with their great herds. The tribes of Khand are nominally subject to the Khan of the Variags, being the most powerful and most numerous people of the land. Power, however, is always relevant, and whilst the Variags may strut about the great grass steppes lording over the lesser folk, they are but a minor player on the world scale, and should the need arise for the forces of Khand to stand alone, then no matter their enemy, they would certainly fall. In leaving their homeland to conquer and fight, it is always in the service to others, the Wainriders at first, and then the full-come might of Sauron thereafter. Yet the greatest test for the peoples of Khand is yet to come. Whispers and rumours come on the wind out of the east of a new threat. Many tribes and clans in the far reaches of Khand and beyond to the uncharted lands speak of 2 nameless wanderers. Their purpose is unknown, but it is said that they are mustering an army of untold strength. Passing merchants tell of 2 giants, clad head to toe in sparkling blue robes and leading an army of dwarves. Dwarves, I ask you. The Oricani Mountains are but a distant memory to many in Khand, and even further, many hold that the dwarves of those mountains actually died off centuries ago. And yet, There is real fear in the eyes of the refugees who have been flooding into Khand. Whether this fabled dwarven army exists or not, something is disturbing the peace, and it draws closer each and every day. Whilst the Variags hold the power in Khand, the armies of the various tribes are still relatively small, and, more importantly, scattered. The head of the Variags, the Khan, must bring these people together in order to appease Sauron, who has commanded that the Variags march against the people of Gondor. From Sturlutza-Khand, the only true settlement in the steppes, the Khan rules over the nomads, and it is here that he holds his court. Khand, in Divide and Conquer, is, much like the Mongols who inspired them, a nation of mighty horse archers. Not only do they field the very best horse archers, but they also have more of them than any other nation. Unfortunately, it is not possible to create a fully nomadic nation in Medieval II Total War, and settling cities and castles is still a requirement for the Variags. And note that the word Variag and Khand for that faction is very much interchangeable. Unlike the nations of Rhûn and Harad, who are confederations of tribes, the setting for Khand is very much that the Variags are Khand, and the lesser tribes are just lesser, minor pockets of people, in numbering in the tens, not in the hundreds, and nowhere near suitable to field armies of their own. The Variags lead the nation wholly, and you can interchange the names. But the Variags' unfamiliarity with settlement does hold them back, and they require guidance from outside, be it wizards or Sauron, to craft of stone. And as alluded to here too, the blue wizards are coming for Khand, and you will be faced with a difficult choice when playing as them. They come at the head of an army of dwarves with support from a very powerful clan known as the Ushishia. Each wizard will command a full army, and you must decide to join them or stand against them. They are making for Sauron and have done much to diminish his influence in the east, and now they seek to finally cut the head of the snake. Should you stand with the wizards, many of your people, those most loyal to Sauron, will rebel, and many of your cities will fall almost overnight. However, you now have two mighty armies to quell that rebellion and put an end to Sauron and free your people. But, should you choose to stand with Sauron, then he sends a reinforcing army to support you and asks that you put down the wizards for him. Both paths have different rewards and mechanics, but if we are to speak plainly, then siding against the wizards is much easier. Ushishia Storm Riders. Perhaps the most powerful clan from the unknown lands to the east, the Ushishia are also the most warlike of the wastes and steppe. All able-bodied members of their tribe fight in times of war, and the Storm Riders are no exception. Men and women fight side by side on these fearsome chariots. Chariots themselves are rarely seen in Middle-earth, not since the Great Wains came upon Gondor many years before the War of the Ring. And they are cumbersome and often slower than riders, but they are deadly in the right hands. The Ushishia have mastered their crossbow craft as well, having close ties to the Orokhani, and they fire with precision from the back of these moving death traps. Windriders of Khand. Prior to the War of the Ring, Sauron sent his servants out into the world to gather support from the tribes of the east and south. He chose, as one would expect, to send the Nazgûl. A tribe who stood against him would not do so for long when an immortal force of fear waltzed into their camp, often silently. In coming to Khand, the Nazgûl rode. It is well known that the black horses of the Nazgûl are unmatched in speed, with only a few amongst the elves able to keep pace, and often then requiring a Meras to do so. But if the Nazgûl are capable of surprise, then they must have felt it coming to Khand. On hearing of a messenger coming to his land, the Khan sent out his famous Wind Riders to meet them. And not only were these barbarous desert folk, as the Nazgûl must have seen them, able to keep a pace, they actually advanced ahead of the black mounts of the Nazgûl. Never a faster unit had been seen, and woe betide any enemy who seeks to flee from the Wind Riders. And with that, Khand's faction overview, I'm afraid, comes to a close. Now, Khand has had very little put into it from the Divide and Conquer side, as you can see quite clearly from this video. Rather than create elaborate stories of how the people in Khand live, we very much just essentially picked up the Mongol nation from Medieval 2, redesigned their units, and dropped them into Divide and Conquer. And as you can see from the first part in Tolkien's setting, the only real information we have of Variags is that A, they live in Khand, and B, they often use axes. There is nothing else known about them. So the video, I'm afraid, as expected, was a touch shorter. But I do hope that you've enjoyed this one. I will give every faction its own video, even if one of them may only be 3 minutes long. So be it, that will be that week's one. But for now, that concludes Khand. So thank you to all those whose names appear on the screen at the moment. I do hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you all in the next one. But until then, Navair na den perimad melonin, and farewell.